Okay, this video is called How to Help a Kid in School. A lot of parents ask me, what advice would you give to help my kid in school? And I'd say, number one, the kid has to make a decision in their mind. They want to do the best they can. Because a lot of kids, they're kind of bummed out in school. They're disappointed with how they're doing. They don't like school too much. School's very feminized. You got all these female teachers. The curriculum in public schools is really stupid. So the kids are kind of sad. They sit there, just depressed, looking out the window. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you is you have to make up your mind. You want to become as educated as you can be. You want to learn how to get good at school. And the first thing I would say is, for getting good at school, anytime you want to get good at anything, ask yourself, what am I doing here? Well, what's the game being played? How do people win this game? And basically, school is a memory contest. So if you want to win a memory contest, you got to get good at memorization. And the way you do that is, first of all, study the memory champions. There's memory contests. You can just YouTube them, and you'll see there's people that can memorize decks of cards, several decks of cards in a row. They can memorize pi out to like 1,000 digits and other things. And you learn those memory techniques. They're very easy to learn. Things like the letter number alphabet, things like the memory palace, all that stuff. All right, once you got a sense of that, then what you're going to see is that school is often a little different than that. It's not the same as a memory contest, but it gives you the idea. So the memory contest contestants, seeing the incredible things they can do, it plants in your mind that you could do that too, because it's actually easy to do it once you know the tricks. All right. Then you have to apply it to school. A good book for getting started is Super Memory, Super Student by Harry Lorraine. That's a really good book. I'll just show you my easiest book. This is my book called The Underground Guide to Study Skills, okay? How to get a real education. Because basically education comes from yourself. It doesn't come from school. Public schools don't want to make you powerful and wealthy and sophisticated. No, they want you to be an obedient employee. Just shut your mouth, do as you're told, okay? If you want to go beyond that and achieve, you've got to want it inside yourself and do it on your own, okay? I've got other books. I'll come back to them a little later, but if you want to know how to sort of like fight through academic obstacles, straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard, another book that I wrote. I went to Stanford, was student athlete of the year, was A+ in the most difficult classes, and then first in my medical school class. So I know school backwards and forwards. Okay, I read everything on study skills because I came out of high school as an athlete and I had to turn into a student. I never took an honors class in high school. All right, but yeah, you have to make that decision in your mind's eye. I was even thinking of dropping out of Stanford my first year, and then I sort of said, okay, my mom said, give it a try for just 1 year. I'm like, all right, Mom, I'm going to become a learning machine, okay, and I'm going to learn everything about study skills and getting good at school. You also want to learn stuff that I would say is important, because a lot of boys, they just hang around athletes, and they're really pretty unsophisticated. They wear a t-shirt every day, and what I'm telling you is if you want to find people to help you, like mentors, you got to learn how to be a little more sophisticated than that. Because if they think you look like a thug, they're not going to help you, okay? They're just going to maybe even be afraid of you, stay away from you. And I also noticed something when I was in college. I hung around with a bunch of guys who were great athletes, the starters on the football team and the wrestling team and the baseball team. And these are the kind of guys who in high school were used to just snap their fingers and have a new girlfriend, okay? But now all of a sudden at Stanford, where 9 out of 10 girls are, they always say 9 out of 10 California girls are ugly, and the 10th one goes to Stanford. So what I'm trying to say is, it was hard to find a girlfriend at Stanford. I never had a girlfriend in 4 years at Stanford. I went back with some of my old high school girlfriends for a while, but it was lonely. What am I trying to tell you? We go to this one fraternity where kind of like the wealthy guys live, and they all dress nice. We all wore sports t-shirts, okay? They were wearing shirts with a collar, penny loafers, okay? Little Izod thing on their shirt with a collar. And these guys, a lot of them had nice-looking girlfriends. We're like, crap. That's what the women want. They don't care. In high school, being an athlete is really prestigious. But in college, especially at Stanford, looking wealthy was real prestigious. So you want to know how to look the look. And why not? Women care more about your bank account than your bench press. All right. What else? So you have to make a decision in your mind's eye. You want to do the best you can in school. You want to kind of become a member of the intellectual aristocracy. All right. But yeah, learning social skills, how to dress nice, having polite manners, that's important. So an old person will see you and say, hey, this looks like a nice kid. Okay, I'll spend a little time teaching this kid something, all right? Because otherwise they'll say, kid's a little thug. They're not going to waste any time with you. All right, how to dress for success. Yeah, as you get further down the road, you want to wear, more sophisticated shirts, wear a suit and a tie and all that stuff, but that comes later. Okay, any educated person, these are the minimum you should know. You should be familiar with the ancient Greeks because they're the first really sophisticated people on the planet. You should know the Romans because the Romans, they were good in administrative things, but they were kind of brutal. And you learn about how people really behave in power situations. And nobody has a dog in the fight. Nobody really cares. You can't really argue as much about more recent historical events because people get offended. They've got a dog in the fight who they support, versus you go back in time to the ancient Romans and you just see complete power and how it works, because you got to understand power. If you want to gain power yourself, you have to understand power works. Studying the Romans, you will learn it. Okay. Then you should know the Bible. You don't have to read the whole Bible cover to cover, but you should know, Genesis. You should know the Gospels. At a minimum, know Genesis and the Gospels, okay? Good idea to read the Proverbs as well. That's pretty easy. And then read more of it if you want, but you should know that much, at least that much. You can't even read English literature without knowing something about the Bible and understand it. Then you should know about the Italian Renaissance, things like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel, making the Pietà sculpture, okay, painting the Last Judgment. You should know about Raphael's School of Athens, like the painting I got behind me here. You should know that. That's the Italian Renaissance. Okay, then here's the next thing, which a lot of people don't know, but really if you want to be culturally sophisticated, you should know about the 1800s. The 1800s is called the Belle Epoque, especially in France, the beautiful era. The Victorian Renaissance in England, the Catholic Revival also, Hudson River School in USA, Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in England as well. That was actually, I think, the cultural high point ever of planet Earth. Okay, if you're interested in things like the humanities, the arts, literature, that's the time. I have separate videos that'll have all the best novels ever written, something about the best plays written. I have other videos that show you all these study skills in more detail. I'm going to briefly mention them here, but my other videos will go into the nuance of them. The next thing I want to talk about is having a philosophic attitude towards school. And for some people, it's the money. I can tell you there was like a disagreement between my ex-wife and myself about motivating children for school. My ex-wife grew up in communist Poland, so she was really poor. She crapped in an outhouse, okay? So she saw America, how rich America was, and that's the dream of these Eastern Europeans in Russia. Come to America, American dream. You can have real money. You're not starving and crapping in an outhouse, okay? Freezing your butt off in those cold places. All right, so anyways, that was her motivation, okay? She said she learned English so fast it wasn't even funny. She said everywhere she went, she said, how do you say this? 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 She said she drove everybody crazy. She spoke English in 3 months, okay? And that's a motivated person can achieve so fast. Schools stink at language. They teach you grammar. Grammar's worthless. Think about learning your first language. Nobody learns how to speak their native language, English, from a grammar book. That's nonsense. School is bullshit when it comes to language learning, okay? Real language learning is about communication and vocabulary. All right, so if you want to be good at Spanish, focus on the vocabulary and communication, like reading bilingual fairy tales, for example, is a great thing to do. And at first, you'll be a little bit behind the other kids who are just doing the grammar like the teacher says. But if you focus on that and you stick with it, you'll be the best student in the class by the end of the semester. Even if some other kid was the valedictorian of your school and you never got an A before, you'll be the best in Spanish. That's how it works, okay? Having a good approach helps. The next thing is I would talk about an aesthetic approach. Like, I didn't grow up poor. My father was actually quite wealthy when I was growing up. But luckily, my father was my role model, okay? So my dad, he was a physician. He would take care of patients in the daytime. Then after that, he would take the dog for a walk. And then he would eat his little dinner. And then he would go in his room and he would read books and he'd listen to classical music. And then his brothers would come over on all the holidays and they would sit there and they'd argue about books, okay? So for me, in my mind's eye, that's what a man does. He works all day long, exercises, and he talks about books on the holidays with his friends and his brothers, his relatives, okay? So it was planted in me to read a lot. And I really didn't like school that much. I was in trouble a lot in school. I think it's because I was so smart. I would do the homework in 5 minutes, and then I was like the class clown trying to make my friends laugh. And then they would put me in school suspension. I spent 2 years in school suspension, 3rd grade and 4th grade. I got suspended a whole bunch of other times too. I was just bored in school, okay? So anyways, I tell you that because I didn't get much education out of school, all right? So what happened, though, was my dad was always reading, so I liked reading. And then my uncle was kind of a jerk, very nasty, and he would insult my father, he'd insult me. So I would go with my dad to the bookstore, a couple months before the holiday coming up to get a bunch of books so I could read those books and I could argue with my uncle. As a kid, I really didn't know that much, but it was good. You know, we used to watch with my father. I'd watch on the BBC, the British Broadcasting Channel, we'd watch these old English novels like Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, The Mayor of Casterbridge, things like that. And so I would read the book, discuss the novel and the movie with my father, and I think that was a good thing. Later on, I realized I didn't really understand those novels that well because I didn't have the emotional experience, okay? I never slept with a woman. I didn't know what love was all about. I didn't understand the emotional depth of what they were writing about. But the fact that I discussed it, talked about my dad, it gave me a great vocabulary, and I would crush all the spelling tests and things like that, and I could write relatively well for a kid. Okay, so anyways, what I'm trying to say is that was all good. So having my dad as a role model who was reading all the time every day was good for me, okay? And you want to have that. Now I'm going to talk about what I see as a mistake my ex-wife made. My ex-wife, I think she wanted to divorce me, so she wanted to turn the kids against me. And, you know, I was working all day, Monday through Friday, coming home at 8 o'clock at night. So she would like send the kids away, you know, to some of a relative or something, or to a friend's house for the weekend. And she would always tell me, oh, you're too autistic, too autistic. I'm not autistic, okay? She would just use that. She can't win an argument with me except by calling me a name, calling me autistic. But what I'm trying to get at was, for example, my kid was in 4th grade. He liked Steve Irwin, kind of the like Crocodile Dundee guy at the zoo. And he had a great TV show, the Steve Irwin Show. And so, you know, I took my kid to the zoo, and then we also learned to have cameras. I got him in an art class. They didn't like any of their female teachers because the female teachers always tried to make them draw flowers or this wimpy stuff. Little boys feel weak and small. They want to be strong, so they want to draw, you know, tough animals, lions and tigers and bears and crocodiles and dinosaurs and army stuff. That's what they want to do. That's a normal thing for a boy to want to do. So anyways, I got him a male art teacher. And they liked that a lot better. And the male art teacher and me, we brought them to the zoo. We taught them how to photograph, telephoto lens of the animals. I taught them how to use PowerPoint, make a PowerPoint presentation for school. And I thought it was a great thing. And the kid was real happy. My wife was not. She's like, are you out of your fucking mind? A 4th grade kid don't need to know how to use PowerPoint. You're so goddamn autistic. You're going to make these kids crazy like you. And I'm like, sweetheart, you should just get out of the way, okay? When it comes to academics, I'm great at academics. And I enjoy it. For me, it's fun. It's not just work, okay? And what I'm saying is, let me work on these things with the kids. But she wasn't having it, and it was a big mistake because the kids should have had me as their role model. Okay, it's like my kids kind of discovered me senior year in high school. Gee, Dad, you were such a great athlete. Gee, Dad, you were so smart. They didn't really know because they got all these stupid athletes from, you know, celebrities. You know, they're wearing an earring, you know, acting like fools. And so when they got a little older, they're like, oh, they understood. Like for me, I always wanted to be like my father since I was little. He was an athlete. He was a boxer. So he was a student athlete. He won the United Kingdom Boxing Championship when he was a young guy. So I wanted to be like him. I was a wrestler. He was a boxer. Okay. So anyways, it's good for the kid to have a male role model. The best one is the father who's a good role model. And if you don't have the father to be the good role model available, then have some other man who's a good role model. That's, you know, hardworking, disciplined, studious, etc. And that is important because the kid will pattern in their mind's eye their behavior after their role model, and that's what you want, okay? Friends are overrated. At a young age, the little kids are all the same age in their classroom in school, so none of them knows anything. They're all equally ignorant, so they're not going to gain much from friends. And it's easy to learn social skills to get along with people. You don't need to socialize that much, okay? Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have friends, but most friendships at a young age are just silliness, okay? They're a little bit you need, fine, but you don't need that much. So don't ever give me that argument. People say, well, the child learns socialization at the public school. Yeah, right. They learn how to drink and do drugs and get in fights and act like jerks. You know, at the public schools, the kids are having sex, you know, getting pregnant. Okay, send them to a Catholic school if you can afford it. In the Catholic school, there's no drugs, there's no sex, none of that stuff. Nobody's even smoking a cigarette. Let's see. So what I'm trying to say is, what I wanted with showing the kid how to do PowerPoint, do photography, learn how to draw, is that they develop an aesthetic sense, that it's beautiful, it's good. Just like Steve Irwin was a creative genius. He was funny, he was nice, he showed you all these neat things about animals, and he loved his job. If you find something you like and enjoy, you can have a good time and still make money. That's good. Plus, you know, Aristotle had said, the greatest of all pleasures is thinking and contemplation, because unlike the other pleasures, it does not wax and wane, meaning that you can read and think and study all day long, and it's enjoyable. And it's cheap, too. It's cheap to open up a book and read. And that can keep you busy for multiple days, one book, and you can go to the library and get the books for free. So you can really keep yourself entertained and happy and be developing your mind. The greatest thing to develop the mind is reading, because you can do it so much. The next best thing, of course, and a wonderful thing is if you got somebody who's older and knows a lot to teach you, that's great. But a lot of times that's not available. You can go on the internet and find people that teach you stuff. I'll put links in the description below here for some of my educational videos. And you can find them. Just type in study skills, for example. Type in best novels or something like that. Let's see, what else? Well, that's what I'm trying to say. So for me, it was what a sophisticated man should be doing. He should be getting himself educated, okay? I sort of came from that background in a big way. And I really wanted, one of my uncles was a physicist. My other uncle was a doctor. My dad was a doctor. And I just assumed I'm going to be, something really educated, probably a doctor, okay, when I was a young guy. I didn't know, and I didn't like school in high school either, but I had it in my mind's eye. Somehow I was either going to be a wrestling coach, because I was a really good wrestler and I like wrestling, or a doctor, okay? And, eventually you get older, you become more aware of your options. But in your mind's eye, that idea, I'm going to do something academic, is good. Another trick is, a lot of times you'll be disappointed on your SAT, ACT scores, or PSAT, these standardized tests. And what I'm saying is, buy the book to practice on your own. I just bought the book, studied for SAT, I took it 3 times, and my score went up like 270 points, okay? So you can go up a lot. Don't let anybody tell you can't change things. You can change your IQ, you can change your study skills, you can dramatically improve your results on these standardized tests, which are basically an IQ test. So you can increase your IQ. Don't listen to people like Jordan Peterson. He's full of crap saying you can't increase your IQ. Of course you can. If you get a good night's sleep the night before, your IQ goes up. If you eat healthy, your IQ goes up, okay? And if you do the opposite, if you stay up all night, get drunk, your IQ goes down, okay? So it can be improved a lot, okay? But what I meant was this philosophic attitude towards school. Like I'll tell you, for example, in biochemistry, I had the attitude that, in order to be a great doctor or scientist, I have to really learn biochemistry. Biochemistry is the language of God that he uses to write the book of life, and I must learn it. And it's an honor to learn it. It's an honor and a privilege, okay? My father would say to me, listen, quit your complaining, you little brat. He said, lots of guys, when I was a young guy, got sent off to be on the front line, okay? They didn't have a choice, all right? So I was pretty lucky to sit around in a room and twirl a pencil, okay, and get educated. And I just thought it was kind of beautiful and cool. Like at Stanford, the biology professors that published an article in Scientific American or some other prestigious journal like Nature, they were like celebrities on campus, and it was in the biology newsletters and stuff. And it's like, wow, someday I could publish an article in Scientific American or something. So that's good. Let's see, what else? Flashcards, light in your box is good for some subjects like pharmacology, microbiology. You need condensed notes. I talk all about that in my other lectures. You need a little reading table in your bathroom. Watch my video on the magic bathroom, okay? I do tons of reading in the bathroom. I read an entire complete book, cover to cover, every week in the bathroom typically, okay? I have pictures of all this stuff that inspires me or what I'm studying taped to the walls. Walk and talk self-test is the most powerful study skill. You got to know that if you want to be a dominant student. You got to have good time management. Get all the BS out of your life. Don't waste any time. Eat a healthy diet. Low-fat plant foods, organic only with no oil is the best way to go. The sooner you start eating healthy, the better. I obviously have a million videos on that. No alcohol or drugs. Stay away from people drinking alcohol and drugs. You don't want to have one sip of alcohol. The best thing is not one sip of alcohol your entire life. And just tell people if they, call you names, say, I just don't want it. No, thank you. Alcohol causes brain damage, okay? All drugs are bad. Marijuana is a brain poison, okay? People have schizophrenic breakdowns and they put them on antipsychotics, and the antipsychotics cause a lobotomy. You don't want that, okay? No vaping, that's all stupid crap. All drugs are bad. There's no exception. You don't need stimulants. I never took a stimulant in my life, okay? That's for losers. Don't ever do that kind of stuff. Let's see. And I hung around guys, also some of my closest friends, they're getting A+s at Stanford too. We were the best students, okay? And none of us drank coffee or tea or took any stimulants. We just studied, okay? And then we had conversations about the material. A sophisticated person can have a conversation about academic material. You don't just look at your notes and highlight them, okay? You should be able to talk about your subjects, okay? Real life is not a Scantron multiple choice test. In real life, you discuss topics. Okay, find some friends if you can interested in your topics, the things you care about academically. Join an academic club if there are any at your school, the chess club, the math team. JETS is Junior Engineering and Technical Society. other educational groups. Learn a little bit about money. A good book to start with is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Kiyosaki. Okay, now I'm just going to show you some of my other books. Here I wrote Medical Student's Guide to Top Board Scores. I got 99s on my boards. If you want something to read in the bathroom, you have no other choices. Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes. It's basically the quotes of like smartest people that ever lived, best writers, best philosophers, etc. If you're a parent and you want to help your kid, this is a book I wrote for that purpose. A big honking book. How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius. Okay, how to get your kid academically going from a young age, and you need both parents to work together. Okay, it's a mistake because I think also a lot of women, they're kind of pretty, and they're kind of used to being spoiled all their life. Okay, and people do nice things to them. For example, I noticed like in some of these residency programs where there was like a lot of foreign medical graduates, that back in those days the chiefs were men. And I knew lots of women that had been doctors in other countries trying to become doctors in USA. The pretty ones got accepted way more than the ugly ones. I knew that because we had a bunch of friends. We knew tons of doctors. And that was so what I'm trying to say is their prettiness opens up doors for them that wouldn't be open up for other people. Okay, as a guy, nobody cares about men. Okay, women are totally spoiled compared to men in the modern world. Okay, so what I'm saying is, you got to work and you got to develop yourself. Nobody's going to, do all these favors for you. But that's also why I think objectively as a man, I had a much better sense than my wife did about how a young guy has to develop himself. It doesn't just happen automatically that you become, sophisticated in academics and manners and how to dress, how to behave and all this other stuff. It takes a while to develop all that. Okay, if you're interested in just developing culture, here's my other book, Best of the West, and you'll learn all this stuff about music, movies, literature, all this stuff. Basically a liberal arts college degree in a book. So anyways, I'll put a couple links below, but if you want to start learning study skills and stuff, and it's like, why not be educated? It's a lot of fun to read, okay? You don't want to be sitting around like a typical dummy watching TV, drinking beer, okay? That's not going to get you anywhere in life. Now, don't get me wrong. You can have a great life doing some type of job like being a plumber, okay? For example, being a plumber, they're not going to get replaced by artificial intelligence. And I think artificial intelligence is totally overrated, by the way. I think a lot of they're just exaggerating with it. But a job where you have to do something physically, repair something, like being an electrician or something, being a contractor, okay? All of those jobs, you can't replace them at all with AI or whatever, okay? But there's lots of different jobs and opportunities out there. But I'd also say if your parents, your friends know how to do that stuff, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, electronics, building a house or whatever, learn all that stuff. It can be valuable for you. Guys that can do a lot of stuff, learn how to take care of a car. The old cars are better, the ones that you can manage them yourself, rather than I don't like all this new electronic stuff where you have to take everything to the dealer, because then the dealer's going to rip you off. Anyways, I hope this was helpful to you, getting you started, and you can do a tremendous amount to help yourself. I went from being like a 3.5 grade point average in high school, never taking an honors class. Then in college, I was just crushing the most difficult classes, organic chemistry, advanced biology, et cetera, A+ in calculus, all that sort of stuff. So, because once I learned how to study and take school seriously, it made a giant difference. Anyways, I hope this helps you.